this is Shamika with Dear Shamika, and I am in the gym with Dr. Mary McConner.
Hey,
Not that
girl.
gym. Hey, not that gym. This gym. So, Dr. Mary McConner, what is the name of your company?
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. And so the name of my company is Inclusive Excellence Consulting, and it's a DEI consulting company. And I work specifically with different organizations to help them, incorporate DEI strategies and solutions into the core of their functioning, right? And we know DEI has been a topic that has been discussed a lot lately,
Mhm.
especially, there's some resistance to it, but then again, there's a lot of support for it as well. So you do see mixed perspectives on it, but it's work that needs to be done. And most organizations recognize that. And so that's why I really love working in this space.
Okay, 14 years of experience. How has your previous experience helped you navigate in having your own consulting firm?
Yeah, so for people who don't know, I actually used to be a chief diversity officer
Mhm.
at a university. And then before that, I worked as the director of multicultural student services, executive director of inclusive excellence. And then actually, leading up to that point, like before I even started in those roles, I always worked in international affairs. So I worked,
Oh.
right, I worked with specifically international student populations, international faculty, international scholars. So I've always had like this global view of DE&I. And, of course, with diversity, equity, inclusion, a lot of what we talk about is focused on issues that are really specific to what we deal with here in the US, right?
Okay.
There are certain things that we deal with that no other country uh, really deals with on the level that we do. But I think having those different perspectives and meeting people from all over the world and learning, like, oh, so this is what they're dealing with in this country, right? It just helps me see things from a broader perspective and to think about DEI in a global way too. So I think that's why, when I tell people, yes, I used to work in international affairs and now I work in DE&I, they are very much interconnected. Like there's a lot of overlap that people don't always realize. So I'm glad I had that experience because it's made me a better practitioner in this space.
Okay, so speaking of DEI, you are a Black woman.
I am a Black woman.
You are in an interracial
I
relationship.
am in an
You're
interracial relationship.
and also you are hearing impaired.
I am.
So, how have all of those things helped you with your consulting firm or helped you navigate this industry?
Yeah, one thing I tell people is that in order to really be sincere and to come off like, okay, this is a big part of my identity, you have to be authentic and true to yourself. And there are times where I'm doing speeches or presentations, and I will mention, like, my husband. My husband is from Turkey, and
Mm-hmm.
he's a Muslim man, and I'm a Black woman who's Christian,
How
right?
did you guys meet?
So we met at Auburn University when we
Okay.
were doing our graduate programs together, and we met at an event. And he's like, "Hey, you want to go out for coffee, or you want to go out?"
Oh, he shot. Look, he
And then,
shot his shot,
I know
didn't he?
he shot his shot. But you know what? And my colleague BJ Word, we have
Yeah.
a podcast together called MJ and the Word.
Love it. You guys need to watch it. It is amazing.
Subscribe. She's always joking like, "Mary, you are a walking DEI." Because of that, because I am, in an interracial relationship, because, I grew up with hearing, hard of hearing. I can only hear in one ear. And then also I have dyslexia. So I'm neurodivergent as well. So all of that, I mean, your experience it's going to shape how you experience the world and how you see the world. And oftentimes you're going to be a lot more sensitive to the needs of others because you've had to go through it. And one thing I've had to really be careful about is making sure, because I used to do this when I first started in the field, like, oh, I can totally relate. Yes, as this, taking the focus away from the person and making it about, oh, yeah, I've gone through that too. But with time, you learn, yes, I can relate to that person, but this is their time to tell me what their needs are. What can we do to make it more inclusive and accessible for this particular person? So you learn and you grow, but all of that has shaped my experience. And I think anybody, you talk to anybody for long enough, and you'll learn like, this is how their lived experience has played a role in who they are, and it has shaped the work they do. And so, yeah. But I use all of those real life examples when I'm doing presentations, and it makes it more authentic. People can connect with you. They're like, oh, wow, she really is a walking DEI.
Right. So you are a transplant. You're not from here.
I'm not.
What was life growing up in Detroit? How was life growing up in Detroit?
You know what? I love the 313. I miss Detroit
Yes.
sometimes. A certain week we have restaurants there called Coney Island.
Uh-huh.
So you know how every place has its signature. And one thing I will say is I think the transition coming from Detroit to Memphis was so easy for me because there are many similarities. So you have this rich cultural heritage there. You got the music, the arts, we had Motown.
Yeah.
You all have the blues and your Royal Records. I got to go to see Boo Mitchell do his
Wow.
presentation, like the storytelling he did about Royal Records. And so I learned so much. And I was like, dang, there's so much similarities between the two cities. And then, like Memphis, Detroit is a predominantly African American city. And with that comes a certain culture. You go to cities like Baltimore, New Orleans. It's just a different vibe, right? But I have really grown to love Memphis, and I've become really well connected here. And I do consider Memphis my home. Like I always joke and say, I'm Aretha Franklin. I let Detroit and Memphis claim me. These are both my homes.
Okay, go ahead and do, for the culture.
For the
Go ahead and say mine.
Maine.
Mine what?
Okay, now for the culture, this is what we say in Detroit as a greeting. Say, what up, though?
What up, though? Really?
What up, though?
I didn't know.
That's what we say as our greeting.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to steal that one.
Yeah, okay.
So, Detroit is Detroit because I've noticed Memphis. When you navigate certain spaces in Memphis, there is, from what I see, a segregation.
Yeah.
Being in an interracial relationship with someone who does share religious differences as you, do you guys encounter discrimination or racism? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, there have been times where, we can feel that someone is glancing at us and may not necessarily approve of our relationship. And overall, I would say we have not dealt with someone being overtly racist towards either of us. Like, your marriage, you shouldn't be married. Now, I will say I have had people question, like, well, how are you able to navigate that? Like, I think it's genuine curiosity. But, you can feel it. You can feel those microaggressions from time to time. And I think for us, because the foundation is so strong, because we do communicate, and because we know, we're like, you know what? We are in sync. It's nothing anyone can say to us to discourage us from our relationship and our love for each other. So yes, we do have some cultural differences, but and other people may perceive it to be like, oh, why are they doing that? But we don't let that discourage us, because I tell people this all the time, even when I'm doing my work at my firm and over the years and me having conversations with students. I say, you'll be surprised. You have a lot more in common with people than you do in terms of differences. And if you just sit down long enough to really learn about that person, learn about their likes and dislikes, what makes them them, you'll be like, oh, I could totally relate. And I just wish, I'm so passionate.
You love passion.
But I do wish, more people looked at humankind that way. Like looked at their fellow women and men and people that way. It said like, maybe we don't need this division. Why are we creating this separation? But I get it. Like, it's natural for people to want to separate themselves based on commonalities, but we really do have a lot more in common than we do different. So
why do you feel people separate themselves from other groups or other races or other sexual orientations, whatever the case may be? Why do you feel people do that?
I think it's just about comfort, a lot of it. One of my favorite books by Dr. Beverly Tatum is called Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Um, and it's a really good book. I highly recommend anyone to purchase it and read it because it does go into detail about how people tend to feel safe. They tend to feel more accepted and included in spaces where they can identify with people, right? So, admittedly, at some point, a lot of us have done this. We have went into a space, we looked around the room, and we seek out people who look like us or people who have similar traits. Like if you're in a room full of men and you see one woman, you'll probably go sit by the woman. It's just like a natural thing to do. Or if you're the only black person, you're probably going to kind of gravitate towards that black person. Oh, hey, how you doing? It's
Right. The little.
hey, it's like this code of okay, all right, we cool.
Right.
But it's just a natural human tendency in every if you look at any nation, any culture, any country, everybody does it. It's just like the natural thing we do. And that's why we have to do a lot of unconscious bias trainings too, because it's like, okay, we got to break that down. Like, because sometimes you can become exclusionary in that and not even realize you're doing it. So, yeah.
Okay, so I do have since you are into DEI,
Uh-huh.
I can't think of her name, but there's this lady, she has an event called Meet a Black Person. Have you ever heard of that event?
Meet a black? No, I haven't heard of that. Is she here
She's
Memphis?
in Atlanta, so I'm trying to get her, shameless plug, I'm trying to get her on the show.
Okay.
But she has this event called Meet a Black Person. It's been on several shows, on several news columns where white people come and they've never met a black person. They want to meet a black person. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been the only person that a person has formally met or had a conversation with that is a black person?
Absolutely, especially when I was in college. So I went to Grand Valley State University, and I had a great experience at Grand Valley State University. But it is a predominantly white institution, and so you're in the middle of Michigan. Well, it's on the west side of the state, and so if you go to Grand Valley, it's surrounded by cornfields, right? It's like it's in Allendale, Michigan. It's not like a big college town, right? And so you have a lot of students who come from different regions. You have people who come from different countries. I worked with a lot of people from different countries who'd never met an African American person. Everything they knew about African American people was based on music or based on videos. I know. And so imagine the conversations I had to have around that, like, no, we don't all rap. We don't all break dance. I'm serious. I've had those conversations.
Oh, they wanted you to break dance?
Nobody wanted
No,
me
I'm just
to,
kidding.
but no,
Okay.
It was insinuated that, all black people are great dancers. And, it wasn't meant to be malicious,
Right.
but still, you still have to educate people and say, yes, there are a lot of black people who love to dance, but that's not necessarily something that everyone loves to do, right? You have differences among people, and people like to do different things. So, just having those educational moments. But yes, no, I've been the only black woman in spaces quite a bit, and I have been the first black woman that a person has ever met, and that's happened a few times, especially ever. Like, especially for our, like the people I used to work with who are from other countries. This was their first time coming to the U.S. and they are just fascinated. I had a person reach out and try to touch my hair.
What did you do? What happened?
You know what? I was very calm about it because I knew there was just a lack of cultural awareness there. And this person in particular was not from the U.S. So, people in the U.S., I'm like, I don't show as much grace. I'm like, do not do that. Come on. Like, don't pet me like I'm a cat or something. But, because she was not from the U.S., she's like, oh, it's so pretty. I love how big because, I wear a lot of big.
Right. Beautiful.
Thank you. But, I did say, thank you so much. And I kind of backed up a little bit.
Right.
And I think she kind of sensed, like, first of all, I don't like random people touching me. That's number one.
It's too much.
It's too much. If I don't know you and you just like all in my space, I'm very much like, okay, let's back up a little. And that's cultural too, because some people, they're right here like, oh. But I have been in those situations quite a bit. And I think that's where education comes into play. You have to be willing to have those conversations, even if they're uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to be like, hey, I don't like when you reach out and grab my hair all the time. But it has to be said or people will never learn, right? So it's just the nature of what I do. It's going to be times where there are a lot of uncomfortable and tough conversations, but people grow from it.
Exactly. So off camera, we talked a little bit about colorism. Would
Mm.
colorism would colorism fall into the DEI category?
Absolutely. When we talk about, and that gets very specific, right? Because you can talk about general stuff in DE and I. So you talk about the purpose of inclusion, the purpose of equity, and then when you really start getting into like the nitty gritty of it, you start to talk about like microaggressions, and you talk about ageism, colorism, you talk about sexism, racism, all the different things that can take place, both consciously and unconsciously. Sometimes it's just flat out overt. And I gotta say this, because I know I get people all the time like, can you come do some unconscious bias training? All bias ain't unconscious. Some of it, people are very aware of the stereotypes and the prejudices they hold. So I just have to say that. And so sometimes it's like, no, we're just going to have straight up discussions around bias because this is not unconscious at this point. And so colorism is very much a part of, the discussions I've had with some people, right? I've personally witnessed colorism. Like I personally witnessed someone saying, "Oh, you're so pretty for a dark skinned girl." Oh, growing up, oh yeah, I heard that. Like if I could count the number of times I've heard that, I would probably have $1,000. Maybe not that much. I'm being dramatic, but at least $100 if I had to count every time someone said that and I got $1 for it. And that's just something too. That's a deep rooted issue. I think that comes from Eurocentric standards of beauty and people still not really seeing themselves as beautiful unless they have certain features or certain skin tones. I don't know if you heard about this. So
Look, I'm excited.
so in Nigeria, and it's met with a lot of controversy, I'll tell you. So in
Uh-huh.
Nigeria, they recently they put out a law saying that only Nigerian models can be in ads now. So no non-Nigerian people can be in ads. And I got to tell you, I had really mixed feelings about it because I get their intent. They're trying to break down that colonialist view of beauty and the white standard of beauty and everything being really Eurocentric and based on skin tone. But it is a bit
Extreme.
I was like, oh, this is very exclusionary in some ways. So, I mean, I think it's important to address it, but I think we have to be careful how we address it too, not to come off as exclusionary. Because, like, even for example, with the natural hair movement, underneath this, I do have
Look.
natural. Look, I keep it real. They know I rock unisex.
Right?
I talk about it on my podcast. But underneath that, I have natural hair, for example. And I remember at one point thinking, like, this is becoming divisive. Like, the relaxed hair.
Shameless plug, you guys. They have a podcast episode coming up on natural hair. So
I was okay, yeah, we talked about all types of hair. But at one point when I did my big chop in 2010, I was like, dang, this is really becoming like the natural hair versus the relaxed hair crew, yeah, it really felt like that at one point, and people kind of shaming each other for not going natural, right? And so you just see these different things show up in different spaces, whether it's skin tone, whether it's hair, whether it's body type, it's just, we have to have discussions around it. Like, hold on, wait a minute. Are we creating division because of these things? And why and how do we dismantle this? Like, because you can't.
we could talk all day.
We could. Look,
Body type. So, can you break down how body type is discriminated against?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and especially, I mean, it shows up in it's more common with women. And I had a conversation with somebody. She's a newscaster, and I did not realize how much women endured in the news space, like in the media space, like in terms of how they have to look. They have to be a certain size. Once you become 40 years old, you're considered like old. And I'm like, 40 is not old, but a lot of times we see that really among women. And it's one of those things. I really like the body positivity movements that have been going on because of that. I think we have to be really mindful of how we treat people based on their abilities and their size, and because It's just like any other form of discrimination. It's hurtful. And it really, your size has nothing to do with how you perform in the workplace. So you should not be equating somebody's physical being with what they're capable of actually doing.
Yeah, we will reduce. I've seen it several times. People will reduce who people are to how they look.
Yeah, all the time.
And when you're someone who has, because I've been overweight, small, everything in between, so I've seen a difference, how certain people feel comfortable being nasty to people based on how they perceive them to look, whether it be their size or whatever. But size discrimination is,
it's a thing.
what is that word?
Oh yeah, and it depends on, and it's more prevalent in some industries than other. Like I said, like media, like if you're in the modeling industry, if you're, oh yeah, it can be very pervasive. But we're seeing more plus size ads. We're seeing more plus size clothing, and you're seeing body inclusivity become more prevalent, which I think is necessary because let's be honest, most of us do not look like what's represented on TV or what's represented in magazines.
Edited.
Right.
A lot
they
of editing.
airbrushing and they cropping and creating making thigh gaps that don't exist. So,
Right.
and that's something we have to remember too. Even with social media, there
Comparing.
it's easy to compare and say, "Oh, I don't look a certain way. I don't feel a certain way because I don't look like her." And we have to remember she airbrushing. Not everybody, but a lot of people are.
Right.
And so that's another thing too with body inclusivity is making sure that we're not constantly comparing ourselves based on somebody else's standard of beauty. And so that's some of the things I talk about. Like when I talk about inclusivity, I get into it. Like it depends on the topic, but we break it down so people understand why it's so important to be inclusive.
Okay, so inclusive excellence. How do you incorporate all of these things into your company in helping businesses to navigate diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, so I mean, it really does vary, but a lot of things that we do in particular, we provide a lot of trainings and workshops. We do also have one-on-one coaching that we do specifically with executive leaders. Because I'm a firm believer that in order for a DEI strategy to work, you got to start all the way from the top and it has to trickle down. Because you can have like all of your employees in different mid-level and entry-level positions like, hey, we want a more equitable and inclusive environment. But if the policies aren't reflecting that and the procedures and the protocols, which usually has to come from the top, right? If the work is not starting here, then it won't trickle down. So we do provide like actual training for leadership teams to say, okay, this is what you can do to show that you're an ally or to create an equity-centered culture. I do keynote speaking engagements, shameless plug.
Hey, do all the plugs. You ain't got to be ashamed.
And one thing we do too that I think is very important, we do equity audits. So an equity audit is where an organization hires you to come in and assess where they are in terms of their hiring practices. You're looking at you just look at multiple things, right? And you're looking at all of this and you produce a report and say, okay, these are some of the areas where you can improve and become more equitable and ensure that you retain, recruit, because that's a big thing, like talent management. And they're like, well, how do we retain our diverse population? They're coming, but they're leaving. And it's like, well, there's some, deeper issues here that we have to look at.
What are some misconceptions people have about diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things, and I think it really depends, right? Because some people view it as, oh, they're about to attack me. Oh, they're, especially if you, because there's so many conversations around privilege and so, some of the different areas where people may feel uncomfortable. And so it's easy to feel attacked. And the reality is you do have to have those conversations, though, in order to dismantle the system, right? You can't not talk about privilege, for example, or you can't talk about anti-racism. You can't not talk about these things because it's very much prevalent issues that we see, not just in the workforce, but in our society. So I think the biggest thing is because it can make people uncomfortable, people want to avoid it altogether. Or on the opposite end of that spectrum, you see what's happening in certain states where they're like completely trying to ban it altogether.
Ban what?
Oh yeah,
Diversity, equity.
like critical race theory, and oh yeah, I don't know how much you know about all that, but like in states like Florida, even here in Tennessee, they're like in our school system, there were certain mandates put in place saying like you can't teach about this, right? And so now it's this let's omit.
I have to shout out my uncle. Shout out Uncle Ricky because he.
Hey, Uncle Ricky.
The amazing thing about this, he was like, you have to talk about critical race theory. So here you
Oh, okay, I got you. Gosh, I have so many thoughts about that, but critical race theory is one of those things. It's not even taught at the K through 12 level, and so I think there's so many misconceptions about some of these different things like anti-racism, critical race theory, and without really understanding the purpose of it. Oftentimes, it's taught in the legal, like it's taught at law schools, you know. And I'm like, wait, did we not teaching this at the K through 12 level? So there has been a lot of resistance to DE and I being, focused. But I will also say that this is just like some select organizations, select states. It's not everywhere, and like a lot of organizations truly have been trying to embrace it. I think the intent is there. Sometimes the execution is not always the best, which is why you have people like me
right.
to kind of help you execute those strategies. But yeah, it's a little divided. Like it's kind of one of those things that can become a divided issue, and people can get really passionate about it. And so it's a reality of what I have to deal with, and DEI practitioners have to deal with.
Why did they want to get rid of it?
Um, just like going back to the uncomfortable piece, because it does make you uncomfortable to have to learn certain parts of history and learn like
It's history.
it's history. It is. You can't omit it. But it does make a lot of people uncomfortable. We've seen this pattern, I would say, especially within the last 5 years, where people have wanted to omit certain parts of history. And the reality is, we have to own that this is very much a part of our history and our identity. And I get sometimes like we want to reshape the perception, because really I think what it boils down to is a lot of people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to feel guilty, and they're trying to change the perception of how we're perceived by other nations. And but the reality is, especially here in the U.S., this is very much a part of who we are, and we can't. The worst thing you can do is to try to avoid conversations or avoid certain aspects of history like it wasn't there, because it's always going to be there, and if you avoid it and don't address it, you're bound to repeat it, right? You're bound to repeat history if you don't know your history. So it's such an interesting time, because you do have so many people who are finally understanding the importance of this work, but then you have a lot of resistance too. So we just really, I think it's important to just continue doing the work and not getting discouraged by those who just don't understand it.
Okay, what are the benefits that companies get from actually booking you for your services?
Well, I will say we are very people centered. And so everything we do, we take a people centric approach to it. And we are very equity centered in our approaches as well. And then one thing with us is we pride ourselves on creating tailored solutions and tailored strategies. So we don't have like a one size fits all approach to anything we do. And of course, yes, we do have like best practices that we adhere by, and we have like different tools, and we have resources that we use for different presentations and workshops and trainings. But we want to make sure that employers are getting what they need out of our services, right? Which is why, we consult with clients, we find out specifically what the pain points are, right? What are they trying to improve? Where are they trying to become better as an organization? And then we work around that. So, yeah.
So that's how you help companies. Does it help with retention? Have you shown that numbers of retention have increased based upon your services?
Um,
Employee retention, or how do you guys measure success?
Yeah, so in terms of metrics, we do have different metrics that we use. Now, some of the stuff, like for example, with equity audits, that's the thing about DEI work, it takes a while. So you're not going to see certain changes right away, but you do see small wins. You do see different things being implemented that's helping to retain employees, that's helping to recruit more diverse employees, and even students too, because I work in higher education. So, or
You're
I used to,
amazing.
I have one foot in like so many things. Like I have multiple feet, and I probably didn't even say that right,
Wow.
but like even looking at student success and how you develop metrics for that, I think it's really important to always remember like nothing is going to happen overnight, and especially with DE&I. But you have to be consistent, and then yeah, that's when you'll see the progress. So yeah, we have helped some companies in like improve certain metrics, but it does take time. Usually, it's going to take at least 5 years, like depending on
Okay.
how pervasive it is. And so hopefully that made sense. Sorry.
It definitely, no worries. I had one more question.
Uh huh.
How do you do it? You do so much. You wear so many. I'm like, you guys, I've been watching Dr. McConner for a while, and I'm like, I don't know how she does it all. She
I don't know
volunteers.
either.
She's in organizations. She runs her own company. How do you podcast MJ and the Word? Please subscribe.
Please.
How do you do all of this?
You know what? I have always been one of those people. The busier I am, the more I can accomplish. Like, and I know sometimes I have to be really careful with that because you can get burned out. Like, and you can get to the point where it's like, you know what? I can't do no more. And it's not that I'm a yes person. Like I say yes to everything. It's just I truly, when I'm passionate about something, I'm just like, yeah, I want to sign up for that. And so for me, I do have like different project management systems to help me stay on track with goals. And I do, you just have different scheduling systems.
Very organized.
Because you have to be very organized. I'll say that. Like when you're doing a lot, organization is key. And over the years, I've learned to become really structured when it comes to that. But I thrive when I feel like I'm making a difference. And if there's a way for me to be a part of something, then I just go for it. I'm all in. Like I don't hold back. So it's just.
I said I had one more question, but I have one more question.
Okay.
How important is representation? You are like I said, you're a black woman from Detroit.
From Detroit.
Yes. How important? Right.
That's like something. Okay, so we had a
Oh, we
rapper.
gotta talk off camera.
Okay.
Uh,
You see-
I already know. We did that at TH. I went to Tennessee State. We used to do the little.
Blade Icewood. Okay, yeah, he's a rapper from Detroit. Anyway,
We used to do the thing. That's where.
that's where it
Detroit.
comes from.
That's where it came from.
That's
Yes.
Detroit.
I thought that was a tip. I can play with y'all.
Y'all have some Detroit students there. That's where it came from.
Yeah, we got to talk off camera. I said I have one more question. What is my last question?
Representation. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
I got
The dance, I was like, took me back to the TSU days. So, being a black woman from Detroit, how important is representation to you?
Yeah, it's so important, especially when you look at people in positions of leadership. I will say, I mean, we are seeing a lot more representation in leadership spaces. I mean, we got our first black woman vice president of our nation and so many other areas, but I still think it's just important that we see ourselves represented in various spaces, right? And so you know what? I'm never going to stop advocating for representation and having diverse perspective, diverse thoughts, diverse experiences. I'm looking over here. There's a table on the side. I'm like, we need different voices at the table. Period. Period. I don't care what kind of organization you are. I don't care. Like, you have to have different voices, different experiences, people with different backgrounds if you really want to be great. Period. If you want to be great, then you will embrace that. So representation is so important. And people need to be able to look and say, you know what? It's nice to see a black woman being successful. I see myself in her. I aspire to be that one day. And yeah.
When you see someone succeeding, that's proof that it can be done.
Absolutely. Without question. And I mean, and if you have, and I'll tell you this, if you have to be that person, like, I'm gonna break this glass ceiling and lift as I climb to make sure that, yeah, it's gonna be hard for me, but I want to make sure that the next person like me is successful. Then sometimes you have to do that too. Like, there have been times where I show up in spaces, I'm like, I'm here. Because in my mind, I was like, I know how important representation is, and I want to make sure that I'm leveling the playing field for the next person behind me. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm just we have a responsibility, I think, to look out for the next generation of leaders as well. So.
Well, thank you guys for meeting us in the gym. No, not that gym, this gym. Have a great day, y'all.
Thank you.
What did you say y'all say in Detroit?
What up, though?
What up, dog? What up, though, man?
What up, though, man? I love that.